We know them, we love them, and their history is as varied as the dishes we can make from them. Hello everyone, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum here in Morristown, Tennessee, and we want to welcome you to a Snowy Fun Fact Friday. Snowy, you say? Why, yes, it is currently snowing outside, and yes, it is cold inside the tavern. But hopefully it's warm wherever you're watching it at. So in the spirit of keeping up with entertaining and educating the public, we're going to press on as best we can. Now today, we're going to be talking about this spectacular and sometimes spooky spud, the potato. Now the potato itself actually has origins tracing back to the countries of Peru and the extreme northwestern part of Bolivia, dating in between the years of 8 to 5000 BC. Now some archaeologists, they say that the potato's first domestication and cultivation took place as far back as 10,000 years ago. But the reality of it is we can't really pinpoint just how far back this goes with any certainty, due to the fact of the matter that the potato, kind of like most of what I'm wearing, whether it be a fur hat, buckskin leggings, wool clothing, they're all organic materials. So they do not actually hold up well throughout hundreds, much less thousands of years of being hidden or buried away or something like that. Excuse me. But remarkably, what we do see is that the earliest verified remains of a potato tuber can be found off the coastal site of Ancon in South America, dating as far back as 2500 BC. And the potato was obviously so loved and valued that it served not only as a staple crop, but it also served as inspiration for ceramic pottery in the shape of vessels. And from there, it spread across the world to become the dish that we all know and love today. But interestingly enough, there was a time when potatoes were viewed with suspicion and disdain, which raises the question, how in the world did the potato go from being spooky and suspicious to becoming loved and laurels heaped upon it? Well, we have to actually take a look back into history, quite naturally. So when the Spaniards first came to the Americas, naturally they came to the Bahamas first and then Central America, and then they started making their way down into South America. And it was there that many of the conquistadors and soldiers, private soldiers, soldiers for the king, what have you, they noticed that the potato was one of the most common crops being grown, and in fact it was a staple crop right up there alongside maize or corn. And it was maize and corn, maize and potatoes that fed not only the people living there, but fed the conquistadors while they were temporarily residing in those lands. Naturally, like many other things that they encountered while they were there in these new lands, they liked them and they decided to take them back so that they could grow them. And that's exactly what happened to the potato. We see that logically the first port of entry to the Old World in Europe would have been through Spain. But we also see that between the years of 1588 and 1593 that the potato was introduced into the British Isles by Spanish sailors who were carrying potatoes with them on board as a food source, and they would stop over off the coast of Ireland in order to dry, salt, and smoke their cod. And while they were there, they would trade off different things, different bits and pieces of food, trinkets, what have you, with the locals. And potatoes, by that means, by hook or by crook, if you will, they actually made their way into Ireland. Now, here's the interesting kicker, though, is that although the Spaniards saw the populace of Central and South America eating potatoes, maize, tomatoes, so on and so forth, with regularity and suffering no ill side effects, then they brought them back to Europe, and suddenly it went from being something that was loved to something that was loathed. Because European botanists, scientists, and horticulturalists, they did what they do best, and that is to dissect, bisect, and try to classify everything into some species or genus, subgenus, what have you. And when they did so, they classified the potato as a member of the nightshade family, similar to how the tomato was classified. And it's because of this that a lot of people viewed it with suspicion and didn't really want nothing to do with it. And not only that, but because the food was foreign and not known to the civilized world at the time, many people viewed it as a work of devils or witches. So they really tried to abstain from this food as much as possible. And for those who were of a liberal mindset, they said, well, the potatoes here, there's not much we can do about that, but at the very least, we'll use it to feed our animals. And maybe at a stretch, we'll use it to feed the poor. So that's basically what the potato's primary role was in Europe at the time: fodder and feeding the poor. But over time, as things progressed, people naturally started to do more studies onto the potato, and they realized it was nowhere near the dangerous plant that it was rumored to be, similar to the tomato. Now, before we go on further into how the tomato gradually became accepted, we do have to discuss this particular fact, and that is that although the tomato was wrongfully assumed to be poisonous, and if you remember the last video we did on the tomatoes, how people were eating tomatoes off of pewter plates and the acidity of the tomatoes would leach lead out into their food, they would eat it, absorb it into their bloodstream, get sick and possibly die. That was a byproduct of the plate, not the plant. Whereas with the potato, on the other hand, people were actually kind of smart in being careful when it came to consuming the potato. Because when it comes to the green leaves, the stems, or even the green skin of a potato, if you've ever bought skins or potatoes from a store and you notice that their skins are still kind of green, then you're either going to want to peel those skins off, or you're going to want to sit them up into a windowsill so the sun can ripen them a bit more. Because those green parts of a potato actually contain a toxic compound known as solanine. And obviously, if consumed in enough quantities, it can cause problems. But if you have a potato like the one I hear today, poor little fella, he came all the way from the house with me for this video. If you have one like what I have here in hand, which is perfectly brown all over, then guess what? You're good to go. You don't have to worry about solanine. And even if you find potatoes with green, slightly green tints to their skin, just peel it off, you should be fine. But suffice it to say, with that little comparison there between the tomato and the potato, people rightfully were suspicious of the potato at that time. And there was another reason why people were not really growing and cultivating potatoes as much as we see today. And that is due to the fact that most agricultural fields in Europe at the time were relegated to certain growing seasons, and even when those growing seasons were over, they would actually turn out the livestock to feed on the fallow and the stubble. Whereas if you were going to grow potatoes or tomatoes, they had to be grown in small patches or gardens near your house. The main agricultural fields being relegated to growing wheat, which was the main crop at the time. But finally, there was a French botanist named Antoine Parmentier who, in the mid-1700s, he came around and he did a study on the potato and found that it was very nutritionally dense and that it was being wasted on simply just being used to feed livestock. That it could feed a lot of the poor and it could feed the whole populace, even the upper class. And so he broaches the subject to King Louis XVI and convinces him to fall in with this clever strategy that he had come up with, and that was King Louis XVI would create potato gardens around the outskirts of Paris. And at night, when everything was supposed to be all quiet and still, there were guards posted around these potato gardens, making the poor and the lower class think there's something inside worth having. And they would go in there. Needless to say, Antoine Parmentier had told the guards to turn a blind eye to what was happening when the poor broke into those gardens. They'd go into the gardens, they'd snatch up a couple of these here tubers, and then they'd go home and they'd cook them and have themselves a nice meal. And from there, it took off. People loved the potato. They swore by the potato. And even today, the potato is a common staple food. And it all began with Antoine Parmentier's little strategy in order to get the public and the populace into eating potatoes on a regular basis. As far as the history of the potato in North America, Well, needless to say, with the native influence, it had already reached the southernmost portions of North America by the time the Spaniards had got there, so it was technically a North American crop, although it had its origins in South America. But what we do also see is that in later years, although there is speculation that potatoes were grown in Virginia and the Carolinas in the 16 and 1700s from seeds or plants, what have you, the first verified record of potatoes being grown in North America comes to us from the year 1719, where potatoes were grown in New Hampshire. And these potatoes were, or the plants at least, had come from Derry. And of course, these plants being from Ireland, they were known as the Irish potato. And some people, they speculated about that, and they even talked to some of the founding fathers about that. Thomas Jefferson, he at one point said, if you mean to talk to me about the potato, I have to assume that you mean the Irish potato, which I can assure you is not a native of North America. And if he was referring to the potato as a whole, then he was wrong, because by that point the potatoes had already been grown in North America. They were already native. But if he was referring to the Irish potatoes specifically at that time, then he was technically correct. Either way, we're going to have to discuss the differences between these different types of potatoes, as well as their impact and their history in Ireland at a much later date. But for today, for one, it's getting cold, and two, I'm running out of things to jaw your ear off about. But this actually concludes today's videos, folks, and I thoroughly hope you've enjoyed it. As always, if you like what we do here on the channel, please feel to like, share, and subscribe, and make sure to click the bell icon so you'll never miss an upload. For those of you who follow along on Facebook and YouTube, all I can say is we greatly appreciate your support. It does not go unnoticed. But until next week for our next Fun Fact Friday, which is going to be in the month of February, we have something special coming up for you guys. Until next week, we're going to go ahead and sign off for now. And this is Isaac White signing off from the Crockett Tavern Museum, saying goodbye and God bless.